the plant that grows where semen drops, the root that shrieks and screams when being dug. Its monikers range from plant human to Satan's apple, and the first recorded uses of it date back to 1500 BC. Since then, its popularity only rose in the following millennia, ultimately becoming the most well-known magical plant in Europe during the Middle Ages. This is the story of Mandrake. Mandrake is a root of plants in the genus Mandragora that primarily grows in the Mediterranean region, the Middle East, Central Asia, and the Himalayas. The root grows up to 2 feet long and carries a scarce resemblance to a human figure. It contains hallucinogenic alkaloids, which likely contributed to the plant's mythic status. The legends of Mandrake can be found in many cultures, from Persia and Dagestan to Germany and France. The common belief was that it demonically shrieks while being uprooted, and everyone who hears it dies. To avoid death, people would loosen the soil around the root, tie a rope from the root to a dog, and throw a morsel far away, making the dog chase it, pulling the mandrake in the process. This method is first recorded by Roman author Claudius Aelianus in the 3rd century AD. It's even mentioned by 13th century Chinese writer Zhao Mi, showing us just how far and wide this legend reached. As it's supposedly a magical plant, you can guess that it didn't grow like the others. Some said that hanged men ejaculated as they died, and their final strength in the form of semen was absorbed by the earth, spawning a mandrake. In other writings, it's either blood, urine, or fat dripping down, causing mandrake to grow. As a plant human, mandrake is the midpoint between nature and humans. Naturally, it became subject to the supernatural. Mandragora use began in ancient Egypt, where the plant was associated with the gods Ra and Hathor because of its round golden fruit. Egyptian priests used it to get into a trance state, a symbolic death through which they could communicate with gods and deities, experiencing a spiritual journey like no other. Artifacts with mandrake imagery were even found in King Tutankhamun's tomb, attesting to its importance in ancient times. While the magical properties of mandrake took a backseat to medicinal ones during antiquity, it came back with full force during the Middle Ages. Saint Hildegard, who was probably the most influential abbess in the High Middle Ages, wrote, "The mandrake takes on and holds the influence of the devil more than other herbs because of its similarity to a human." As witches are known to exchange God's love for the devil's power, the mandrake root became extremely popular in their arsenal. It was an ingredient in various recipes for love potions and flying ointments. Additionally, witches used it to hex people. Such uses are even recorded in the Avar culture of the East Caucasus, where mandrake was called barking grass and witches barking women. According to the legends, witches would use mandrake to perform a ritual that would curse a person, inducing rabies-like symptoms, causing the person to bark and even attack others. The hex had no known cure. The relatives had to chain down the bewitched in a separate room until one would die. In German folklore, the word Alruna meant both mandrake and witch, showing just how closely the root was tied to witchcraft. There's even a recorded case from Hamburg in 1630 where 3 women were put to death for possessing mandrakes in their homes. However, mandrake eventually became popular even among the commoners. Many people believed in the magical powers of amulets made of mandrake. Such amulets were believed to make barren women fertile, poor men rich, and hapless folk lucky. Some scholars even record mandrake being carved into mannequins that would carry supernatural powers ranging from attracting love to fending off demons. However, they had to be taken care of. The little roots had to be carefully dressed, laid in special small containers, fed, tended to, and finally, passed on to another ritualistically. Paul Christian, a 19th century French author, described a few methods of preparing a mandrake mannequin. One of them involved burying the root in a dead man's grave, watering it with cow milk for 30 days, and finally, wrapping it in a dead man's burial shroud. Such beliefs were very popular. As a result, the root became an extremely sought-after item in the Middle Ages. Many crooks jumped at the opportunity and shaped other roots to look like mandrake. In the 16th century, the father of English botany, William Turner, wrote, The roots, which are counterfeited and made to look like little beings and are sold in England in boxes with hair in the form of a human being, are nothing but foolish fabrications and are not natural. The mandrake use in witchcraft has remained to this day in new religious movements like Odinism and Wicca. However, before being used by shamans, witches, and magicians, mandrake was used by physicians in classical antiquity. Mandrake's medicinal effects were mentioned as early as 2000 BC in Mesopotamia. The root was a widely used ingredient in recipes for various ailments, ranging from headaches and constipation to rectal and urinary problems. Similar properties were also mentioned in the Ebers Papyrus, written in 1500 BC. Furthermore, nearly every great physician of antiquity wrote about the medicinal uses of this plant. One of the first ones was Hippocrates, who advised it, "To those who are troubled and ill and want to hang themselves, give mandrake root to drink early in the morning, an amount less than would make them delirious." The statesman Demosthenes might have indicated that mandrake could have been used recreationally. Oh, Athenians, but we are not even able to wake up, and we look like those who are drunk for mandrake juice or some other drug of this kind. Theophrastus expanded on mandrake's uses in his Historia Plantarum, writing that its leaves could heal wounds, and the roots steeped in vinegar helped with erysipelas, gout, and sleeplessness. However, he also warned that it could cause madness. Plato and his student Aristotle also attested to mandrake's soporific properties. The former wrote how crews can overtake a ship by intoxicating the captain with mandrake juice, and the latter grouped it with other sedatives. In De Materia Medicina, Pedanius Dioscorides also mentions mandrake roots as a potent anesthetic when boiled in wine. He goes on to write that combining fresh mandrake leaves with barley groats can remove abscesses, growths, and indurations from the skin. Most interestingly, he described mandragora as abortion medicine. About one hemiobolon inserted by itself as a pessary draws the menstrual period and embryos, fetuses, and as menstruation medicine. The seed of the fruit cleanses the uterus when drunk, and it stops the red discharge when inserted with native sulfur. Finally, he warns about high doses of mandragora and says that as little as 1 drachma mixed in with food can knock a person out for 3 to 4 hours. Similar properties were recorded by a Roman encyclopedist Aulus Cornelius Celsus. In De Medicina, he wrote that just placing mandragora fruits under the insomniac's pillow would make him fall asleep. He also states that mandrake can be an effective cure for a plethora of ailments, from toothache and headache to pain in the hips, liver, spleen, and ribs. Pliny the Elder gives us even more information on mandrake's properties in Naturalis Historia. It is also taken in drink for snakebite and before surgical operations and punctures to produce anesthesia. Additionally, he recommends it for convulsions, melancholia, and suicidal tendencies. Finally, Pliny warns the reader that taking too much mandrake can result in death. In the Middle Ages, many authors, including the Syriac physician Johannes Serapion, the Persian polymath Avicenna, the Italian bishop Bruno de Segni, and the English monk Bartholomaeus Anglicus, reference the anesthetic use of mandrake in surgeries, amputations, and cauterizations. Such an array of records, spanning from the Middle East to Europe, might suggest that mandrake played a huge part in medieval medicine. However, it's unclear to what degree these people experimented with mandrake themselves. Perhaps they didn't use it personally, but just rephrased Pliny's and Dioscorides' work. As a result, we cannot draw robust conclusions about the popularity of mandrake as an anesthetic in medieval medicine. However, there's another use of mandrake that dates back to even older times. Mandragora was known for its aphrodisiac and fertility-inducing effects for millennia. For example, the Hebrew word for mandragora fruits translates to love plants, while the Arabic word for it is Satan's apples, both showing the deep-rooted belief in mandrake's passion-inducing properties. According to some scholars, Aphrodite, the ancient Greek goddess of lust and love, was also associated with mandrake. But the first mentions of such properties can be found in the Bible. In chapter 30 of Genesis, barren Rachel asks Leah for mandrakes. Then Rachel said to Leah, "Give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes." Most scholars agree that Rachel wanted mandrakes because they could promote conception. Additionally, mandrakes are also mentioned in the only erotic poem in the Bible, the Song of Songs. Thus, it comes as no surprise that mandrakes' aphrodisiac properties were widely known in ancient times. In Physiologus, written in the 2nd century AD, it's mentioned in a story about elephants that served as a metaphor for Adam and Eve. The female seeks out the so-called mandragora plant and partakes of it. Straightway she is inflamed, and going to the male gives him the plant. He partakes of it, and straightway is inflamed, and cohabits with the female. Even 4th century Roman Emperor Julian the Apostate references such effects in one of his letters. Who can prefer in a woman conjugal love to piety without being thought to have taken large draughts of mandragora? Over a millennium later, 17th century Spanish royal family physician Thomas Maria Ballarde published a treatise on medicinal herbs and devoted a third of it to mandrake. He writes that, "This plant has the virtue and effect of making fecund and fertilizing what is sterile." The chemical contents of mandragora differ slightly between the species. However, all of them are full of tropane alkaloids known for their psychoactive properties, including hyoscyamine. It's an anticholinergic toxin that primarily impacts the parasympathetic nervous system. As a result, ingesting it can result in dry mouth, dizziness, nausea, or even sexual arousal, euphoria, hallucinations, and delirium. Mandrake serves as a perfect example of how the ancients were smarter than we often give them credit for. While they lacked rigorous scientific methodology, that didn't prevent them from finding uses for plants around them. Although mandrake isn't widely used anymore, the myths have survived well into modern times. There's a story from 1908 about an Englishman who was tidying up a neglected garden and came upon a root. He called it mandrake and ceased to work at once, saying it was awful bad luck. Before the week was out, he fell down some steps and broke his neck.